So we are on the chapter on persistence. Welcome, everybody. My name is Paul Martinelli. This is a journey through the book, Think and Grow Rich, from the perspective of an entrepreneur. What, as entrepreneurs, can we pull from this lesson? Again, as I shared earlier, when Patrick Hayes, my mentor, gave me this copy of the book, of course, it was brand new when he gave it to me, beat up since then. The first assignment he gave me was to read the chapter on persistence every day for 14 days, and you can see inside where I did that. And he said, if you miss a day, you go back to day number one. That's a great exercise. If you wonder if you've got persistence or not, or you want to develop persistence, that's a really great exercise to do. And every time you read the chapter, there's something new to do it. Again, for those of you who are part of the Fully Resource Program, and those of you, hundreds of you who just joined into the Brain Revolution, welcome. Great to have you. So he says persistence, the sustained effort necessary to induce faith. To induce faith. So he's saying by persistence, this is how we can increase faith. Remember, in the chapter on faith, we said that each person is given the same measure of faith. I don't have any more faith than you have. You don't have any more faith than somebody else. We all have the same measure of faith. It's how much of that faith we develop. And he's saying that persistence is a tool, a necessary tool for us to increase faith. What's the advantage of creating, an increased amount of faith in our life? Well, if we have more faith, I believe we deepen our belief. Belief drives our behavior. I think if we have faith, it increases our expectation for what it is that we want, and expectation builds belief, and belief drives behavior. I think if we have faith, we have confidence. It's what Henry David Thoreau said. He said, if one advances confidently in the direction of their dream and endeavors to live the life that they've imagined, they meet with success at unexpected common hours. Well, how can someone advance confidently in the direction of their dream if they don't have faith? So if faith produces confidence, I would think, would fortify belief, and belief drives behavior. So persistence is a pretty important part of this entire process. If we go right to line 1, he says, persistence is an essential factor in the procedure of transmuting desire into its monetary equivalent. The basis of persistence is the power of will. The basis. So let's understand that persistence is different from determination, right? Many people think that, if I'm determined, I'm persistent. No, you can be determined and not be persistent. The difference between determination and persistence is that persistence is determination in the face of failure and struggle. In other words, you can be determined to do something and then quit. Persistence is that you're determined to do something, and while you're failing, while you're struggling, while it's not going your way, you continue to persist in spite of all evidence that whatever you're doing isn't working. This is why he says the basis of persistence is the power of will. He's not talking about willpower. He's not talking about willpower. He's talking about one of the 6 intellectual faculties. In the book, he says after 20 years of study of 25,000 people, he came to the conclusion that these top people, these top 500 people, these are the Edisons, the Ford, Rockefeller, Alexander Graham Bell, the Wright brothers. He said that they had, it wasn't that they had acquired an abundance of generalized or even specialized knowledge that led them to success or achievement. He said it's that they had developed their intellectual faculties to such a degree that they could create, manifest, or attract anything they wanted in their life. So you have to ask yourself, what are these intellectual faculties? And most people don't ever learn them. We do an in-depth teaching of them in our Fully Resource Program, but one of them is the will. You have will, reason, memory, imagination, intuition, and perception. These are the 6 intellectual faculties. And he's saying here that the basis of persistence is the intellectual faculty of the will, not willpower, but the faculty of the will. The difference is the faculty of the will is our ability to have sustained concentration, to stay focused on one idea to the exclusion of all outside distractions. So that in the face of failure, while we're entrepreneurs, while we're moving forward in the direction of our dreams, when things don't go our way, we just don't quit. We persist through them. We persist through them. We continue to take action, but what we're doing is we're focusing on our dream. We're not giving our attention to the outside conditions or circumstances. Remember, the intellectual faculty of the will is our ability to have sustained concentration on one idea to the exclusion of all outside distractions, even when those distractions are failure and struggle. Let's drop down to line 11. He says, the majority of people are ready to throw their aims and purposes overboard and give up at the first sign of opposition and misfortune. Isn't that true? I mean, I think that's the, it went, if Michael Gerber's work in the E-Myth proved anything, where he says that 80% of most businesses fail in the first 5 years, the reason why they fail is because the entrepreneur quits. The entrepreneur lacked the intellectual faculty of the will to stay focused on their dream and to persist through those failure points. Entrepreneurs either have or they develop a resiliency. They have or they develop resolve. They have and develop flexibility, resourcefulness, creativity. These allow them to pivot when things don't go right. Regardless of what's happening, they stay engaged. They take on personal responsibility. They don't blame everybody else. They don't blame the economy. They don't blame the government. They don't blame COVID-19. Are you not? I mean, how many of us are? I mean, I am just sick and tired of having, poor service from a company because they tell me, it's because of COVID. What do you mean it's because of COVID? I mean, we're a year into this thing now. If you haven't been able to figure out how to get your product or service delivered in the last year and you're still using COVID as an excuse, that's a sorry excuse for a business. And he's saying here that what happens is most people, most entrepreneurs give up at the first sign of opposition. A few carry on despite all opposition until they attain their goal. That's the entrepreneur's journey through Think and Grow Rich. It really is. Is that in the face of struggle, we persist through. We recognize that, we have to have resolve. We have to develop these characters of flexibility, resourcefulness, creativity. We have to be able to pivot. We have to be able to change course direction. I love this on line 15. He says, there may be no heroic connotation to the word persistence, but the quality is to the character of man what carbon is to steel. Carbon to steel is what makes steel strong. And he's saying that persistence is equal to the character of man of what carbon is to steel, that if you have persistence, it makes you strong. He says the building of a fortune generally involves the application of the entire 13 factors of the philosophy. So remember, Think and Grow Rich, each chapter of the book is one of 13 fundamental principles that Hill discovered after searching and researching for 20 years and interviewing 25,000 people on what makes people successful, what allows people to reach levels of achievement. And each one of these 13 principles is a chapter within this book. We're looking at chapter number 9, so we're looking at persistence. And he's saying that the application of the entire 13 factors of the philosophy, the principles must be understood and they must be applied with persistence by all who accumulate. He says, if you are following this book with the intention of applying it, it conveys to your first test of persistence will come when you begin to follow the 6 steps described in the chapter on desire. That is so true. Most people who read this book, if you go back to the chapter on desire on page 33, where he gives us the 6 steps, do you know most people never complete that? Most people won't follow that 6-step formula for desire for 30 days. Most people quit. Now, it's the hardest thing to do, right? It's the easiest thing for us to do is to think of what we want, to decide, get clarity around what we want, to pick a date for its achievement, to develop a plan, to become aware of the sacrifices that we're willing to make in order to achieve it, to write all of that out on one card, and to read that card twice a day. That's the 6 steps. And do you know that most people who pick up this book never do that. They lack the persistence to do that because life gives us pop quizzes. Life gives us a pop quiz in the form of a diagnosis, a divorce, something goes wrong in a relationship, something happens in business or whatever it is. And then what we do is we surrender. We give up. We fail to develop persistence. And remember, he's saying that persistence is to the character of man to what it is, what carbon is to steel. If we go over on page 178, on line 27, I love this because he says, the author is checking up on you at this point. In other words, he's calling you out, right? He's saying, hey, look, if you're in this study and you're on chapter 9 now, I'm going to call you out because lack of persistence is one of the major causes of failure. Isn't that interesting? That it's not the economy, it's not a vendor, it's not lack of sales, it's not marketing, it's persistence. If you boil all those things down, those are just problems to be solved. If you've got a sales problem, it's a sales problem. If you've got a marketing problem, it's a marketing problem. If you've got a research and development, it's a research and development problem. If you've got an employee problem, it's an employee problem. But what's going to get you to solve all those problems is persistence. Are you going to stick with it and solve the problem? And he says a majority of people fail to do that. He says, moreover, experience with thousands of people has proved that lack of persistence is a weakness common to the majority of men and women. So, hey, if you're in struggle in this area, you're not alone. That's what he's saying. You're not alone. It is a weakness which may be overcome by effort. In other words, you can do it, but it's going to require work. Would you expect anything different? I wouldn't expect anything different. I mean, when I got into business, and if you're an entrepreneur, you got into business, you didn't expect it to be easy, did you? I mean, you knew it was going to be a lot of work. He says the ease with which lack of persistence may be conquered will depend entirely upon the intensity of one's desire. He's calling us out. He says, basically saying, how bad do you really want it? How bad do you really want what it is that you want? Are you willing to go through the fire? Are you willing to go through the struggle in order for you to get what it is that you want? Are you willing to claim in the marketplace and declare in the marketplace what your goal is and reach for that? See, so many entrepreneurs will say, I'll do whatever it takes in order for me to reach my dream and goal. And really, what they're saying is, I'll do anything but what's required. If for those of you who are coaches and mentors, you'll be working with a coaching client or you'll be mentoring somebody and you'll say, okay, here's the agreed to 5 or 6 or maybe 10-step things that you've got to do next. And they'll agree to them. And they'll come back having done 8 and saying, well, it just didn't work. Well, if you've got 10 ingredients in a cake and you leave 2 out, you can't expect the cake to taste great. It requires all of you. And your dream and the fulfillment of your dream is going to require everything that's required. Most people will say, I'll do whatever it takes, but what they're really saying is, I'll do everything it takes that's comfortable, that's easy, that's within my comfort zone, that's within my scope. He says, if you find yourself lacking persistence, this weakness may be remedied by building a stronger fire under your desire. Isn't that true? See, if you really fall in love with what you want, that desire for what it is that you want, if it's real in your mind, and you make it real through the power of autosuggestion, a chapter we already talked about, through doing the 6 steps in desire, by reprogramming, or what Joseph McClendon would say, just encoding a new operating system. That this is what you've fallen in love with. The problem for most of us is that ignorance is not painful. In other words, if you've set a goal or a dream for yourself and you say, I'm going to do this and you don't do it, if there's no penalty, if there's no real consequence, like if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, who's going to punish you? Who's going to hold you accountable? What price do you have to pay? And so when there isn't the stick, then you better make sure you got a big carrot. You have to fall in love with this idea. That's why, in the first step, all through the first quarter of the book, the question is, what do you really want? What would you really love your life to be like? And the pain of disconnect, the pain of not having that, has to serve as the stick in order for you to persist through. He says on line 48, page 178, if you find you are weak in persistence, center your attention upon the instructions contained on the chapter on power. Surround yourself with a mastermind group. And through this cooperative efforts of the members of this group, you can develop persistence. See, if you're in a really good mastermind group, those people are going to encourage you. Those people are going to serve as a collective consciousness for you. They're going to serve as accountability partners for you. They're going to serve as partners in belief with you. They're going to believe in you, encourage you. The collective consciousness of that group will give you new ideas that, you may bring an idea for what it is that you want. And if you have a good group of, 12 or 13 other people, imagine 12 or 13 other people listening to what you want. They're in sympathy and harmony with your dream. And imagine if they all start to yes and your dream. Yes, I see your vision, and you could do this and you could do this. Or you can meet this person and I can connect you to that person. That's the power of a mastermind group. Is that you have a group of people, so you can see how, if you're in a really good mastermind group, that it would help you develop persistence. That's what he's saying here. If you're struggling with that, get in with a really good group of people. If you don't have a mastermind group and you're looking for it, click on one of the links below. Join one of mine. We've got we've got one in May and June that are sold out. We're going to add one more in June. So we've got 12 spots. We just opened up one more in June. So jump in. Get into a group with really good people who are going to encourage you, hold you accountable, who are going to support you, who are going to serve as kind of this think tank for you. On page 179, on line 62, he says, poverty is attracted to the one whose mind is favorable to it. Think about that. Now, most of us wouldn't think that, our mind is programmed for poverty or is favorable to it. But if we focus on all the things that are going wrong, if we demonize the rich, if we demonize money, if we don't have a really good perspective and understanding of what money is, what its purpose is, how we use money, how we make money, money doesn't make us. If we don't have a really good, if we don't have prosperity consciousness, then you have poverty consciousness. It's one or the other. He says poverty is attracted to the mind who's favorable to it, as money is attracted to him whose mind has been deliberately prepared to attract it. And through the same laws, poverty consciousness will voluntarily seize the mind which is not occupied with the money consciousness or prosperity consciousness. A poverty consciousness develops without conscious application of habits favorable to it. The money consciousness must be created in order to, unless one is born with such consciousness. Catch the full significance of this statement. A poverty consciousness develops without conscious application of habits favorable to it. The money or prosperity consciousness must be created to order, unless one is born with such consciousness. I don't know about you, but when Paul was in the bassinet, when I was just a little baby, the conversations in the house that I was in was not about prosperity consciousness. It was about poverty. There were lots of conversations taking place in the field of my conscious awareness as I was just a little baby. But those conversations around money was not about the abundance of money. It was about the lack of money, the scarcity of money. And I was programmed, as many of you were, with the same linguistic metaphors of, money doesn't grow on trees. Clean your plate because there's starving people here or there. You'll never make enough money, that the only way to get ahead is, by taking advantage of other people. We demonize the rich. And then, in my life, oh my goodness, I mean, I surrounded myself with people who were nice, and they were nice, happy, fun people, but they were going nowhere. If you go back to my life when I was, I don't know, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, before I started my cleaning business at 22, I was hanging with a crowd that was going nowhere and picking up speed. I mean, if we were going in any direction, it was the wrong direction. I mean, if we were talking about opportunity, we were talking about how opportunity was taken from us, how it wasn't fair, who we could blame for it, all the reasons why things wouldn't work. That's what that's what he means by, my mind was favorable to poverty. It wasn't until I reprogrammed my mind. We got a program coming up very soon, probably in the summer or early fall, on doubling your income, and it's really a program around money. The idea of being able to double your income in 12 months, for most people, they immediately reject the idea. They say, I can't do that. Well, if you immediately reject that idea, well, then you're right. You won't. Let's jump over to page 180. He says, with persistence will come success. We're on line 88. If you select your mastermind group with care, you will have in it at least one person who will aid in the development of persistence. Some men who have accumulated great fortunes did so because of necessity. They developed the habit of persistence because they were so closely driven by circumstances that they had to become persistent. Isn't that true? Sometimes it is when our back is right up against the wall that we become aware of our resources. It's not until we are really challenged. This is why I always say that the content of our life is the curriculum through our evolution. I was embezzled in business in the early years of my cleaning business, and it was devastating. Not only was the betrayal devastating, but the loss of over $45,000 of what was set aside tax money for my employees' Social Security matching taxes, and the penalties that were put on top of me were crippling financially. And at the time, it was the worst thing in the world. And now I look back and I am so grateful for the content of that life, because the content of that life lesson was the curriculum through which I evolved. I was forced to learn business math. I was forced to learn what W-2 was, 1099, UCT 6, 940, 941 taxes. I was forced to learn what a P&L was, what a general ledger was, what an account balance was, what accounts receivable and accounts payable were. I was forced to understand my business in ways that I would never have been forced to. Isn't that true? We are closely driven by circumstances that we had to become persistent. In my mastermind, this is the role I serve. I serve as that person who speaks into people's lives about fortifying their faith and really sticking to it through the struggle. He says there is no substitute for persistence. It cannot be supplanted by any other quality. It can't be. See, like if you're not really creative, maybe you can kind of muscle your way through with a little bit of logic, right? And if you're really logical, maybe you can use imagination. If you're really imaginative, maybe you can use logic. But he's saying persistence, you either have it or you don't. There's nothing you can do. There's no replacement for it. And not even determination. Okay, because again, you can be determined, but then still quit because you lack persistence. Big difference between determination and persistence. He says, remember this, and it will hearten you. In the beginning, when the going may seem to be difficult and slow, those who have accumulated the habit of persistence seem to enjoy insurance against failure. Wow. Wouldn't you love to have insurance against failure? That's what he's saying that persistence is. He says, remember, persistence is the character of man, what carbon is to steel. That while you are facing struggle, while you're being embezzled, while the launch is going terrible, while the sales aren't coming through, while the marketing isn't producing what you wanted, while the employees are dropping the ball, while the economy is tanking, you're muscling through it. You're becoming aware of the resources within you and you are putting them to work. You're staying focused on your goal. You're staying focused on your dream. No matter how many times they are defeated, they finally arrive up toward the top of the ladder. Those people who have cultivated persistence. See, in 1988, when I started I kind of wrote this down. In 1988, I started my business. I didn't realize that was one of the times of major recession in the United States. I didn't know that. In this case, ignorance was bliss. My family and friends thought I was crazy. My family, when I told my family that I wanted to start a commercial cleaning business, they all told me to go get a job at the post office. These were my partners in belief. Go get a job at the post office. Go deliver mail for 20 years. Get a good government job because you're never going to make it. That's basically what they told me. And these were the people who loved me. These are the people who were supposed to believe in me. At 22 years old, I didn't have a bank account or a credit card when I started my business. I had no knowledge of, as I said before, what a profit and loss statement was, what a balance sheet was, what workers' comp insurance was, what liability insurance was. I was clueless. The first 2 years of my business was nothing but struggle. And then I met Patrick, and then we started to mastermind on this book together with other people. And everything began to change. First it changed within me, then it changed in my outside conditions and circumstances. This is why, the Bible teaches us, seek first the kingdom within you. Seek first the kingdom, seek first the resources within you. Don't try to change the outside conditions and circumstances of the world. Don't worry about trying. Look, I couldn't change the economy. We were in a recession. I couldn't change that. But what I could change was my response to it. I couldn't change the economy. We were in a recession, period, end of story. When you're in a recession, you're in a recession. Sometimes you get hit with the yogurt of life. Sometimes you get caught up in the collective consciousness. But you have been given dominion over all things in your little world. You have dominion over what you think. You have dominion over what you do. You have dominion over how you develop. What you put to work in your life, what you deploy. He says on line 99, sometimes it appears that there's a hidden guide whose duty is to test men through all sorts of discouraging experiences. Isn't that true? Sometimes it does seem kind of like success says, you know what, you have to pay enough of a price. It's kind of like, it's kind of like the universe, infinite intelligence, God is saying, let's just see how bad you really want this. Do you really want this? There does seem to be this hidden guide. Those who pick themselves up after defeat and keep on trying arrive, and the world cries, bravo. I knew you could do it. The hidden guide lets no one enjoy great achievement without passing the persistent test. It's funny because I think it was in 1996 or 1997. So it had been 9 years or so after I started the cleaning business. I was at the Breakers Hotel, one of the most opulent, most beautiful resorts in the world in Palm Beach. And I was receiving an award, an Entrepreneur of the Year award from a business university in Palm Beach called Northwood University, founded by the founder of Amway, Rich DeVos. And so here is Rich DeVos, probably the world's greatest entrepreneur, right? The founder of Amway. Rich DeVos and Jay Van Andel, who started Amway, started selling soap door to door and created a multi-billion dollar business. Changed the world, created financial freedom for millions of people. And here I am, a high school dropout. I don't know, I was probably 30 years old at the time, receiving an Entrepreneur of the Year award. And my family, who had come to the ceremony, did just this. Bravo, we knew you could do it. The same family who 9 years before at the Thanksgiving dinner, when I announced that I was going to launch the cleaning company, said, you're never going to be able to do that. Who do you think you are? So true. So true. Those who pick themselves up after defeat and keep on going, keep trying, they arrive and the world cries, "Bravo, I knew you could do it." The hidden guide lets no one enjoy great achievement without passing the persistent test. Those who can't make it simply don't make the grade. Those who can't take it are bountiful. Those who can take it, those who can take the hits and keep going are bountifully rewarded for their persistence. They receive as their compensation whatever goal they are pursuing. That is not all. They receive something infinitely more important than material compensation. The knowledge that every failure brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. The greatest thing that happened to me was that I was embezzled. The greatest thing that happened to me was that I failed. The greatest thing that happened to me was that I was in struggle. You know, as a child of abuse, I was blessed. As a kid growing up, listen to me, poverty teaches you something that prosperity can never teach you. Poverty teaches you something. Growing up in a really abusive home taught me things that growing up in a loving home never teach you. And I am grateful for those things. And it is through that gratefulness that I was able to surrender resentment. That's why, I wrote the book called The 3 Missing Chapters of Think and Grow Rich, where I talk about, I don't know that you can apply these principles without the principle of forgiveness. And it's the first chapter in my Missing Chapters. If you don't have a copy of that, you can get it on Amazon, The 3 Missing Chapters of Think and Grow Rich. I think there's 3 principles. I think if you're going to put this to work, you've got to have an understanding of forgiveness, an understanding of tithing, and an understanding of unconditional love. And those are the 3 chapters in my book. But it was being a child of abuse, growing up in poverty, that taught me this character of persistence. He says, now look, on page 181, there are exceptions to this rule. A few people know from experience the soundness of persistence. They are the ones who have not accepted defeat as being anything more than temporary. See, I just knew I was going to make it. Again, intuition is one of our 6 intellectual faculties. And if you grew up in tough times, if you grew up in a home that was abusive, if you grew up in poverty, chances are you developed a heightened level of intuition, an ability to just feel the world, an ability to feel the conditions and circumstances that you were in, an ability to just, that 6th sense is usually highly developed in people. And I just knew I was going to make it. He says they are the ones whose desire are so persistently applied that defeat is finally changed into victory. We who stand on the sidelines of life see the overwhelmingly large number go down in defeat, never to rise again. We see the few who take the punishment of defeat as an urge to greater effort. These, fortunately, never learn to accept life's reverse gear. But what we do not see, what most of us never suspect of existing, is the silent but irresistible power which comes to the rescue of those who fight on in the face of discouragement. If we speak of this power at all, we call it persistence, and let it go at that. One thing we all know, if one does not possess persistence, one does not achieve noteworthy success in any calling. See, as an entrepreneur, you can't just have persistence in your sales and marketing. You just can't be persistent in what you do and your effort. You have to be persistent in how you recruit new members to your team. How you have to be persistent in the recruitment of vendors that you work with. You have to be persistent in innovation and imagination and creativity. You have to be persistent in the discipline to stick to a budget. You have to develop persistence in maintaining your attitude. You have to have persistence in developing your culture. You have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to be persistent in every single area of your life and in your business. You can't afford the luxury of laziness in this area, in any area of your life as a successful entrepreneur. Never. If you truly see a self-made man or a self-made woman who really had a dream and went after it and fought against all odds, it's persistence. I had a meeting early this morning at 6:45. I was on a call with, I don't know, maybe 100 people in Poland with our two partners on our Polish platform, Ivana and Dorota. And these two powerhouse women grew up in communist Poland, grew up with no food, grew up, where their family would get a coupon so that they could get 3 eggs for the month. Grew up where they had to sew rags into their shoes. And now to see them both highly successful. They're persistent in every area of their life. They're two of the most hardened, determined women that I've ever seen in business, ever. And they love people, and there's a softness and tenderness to them, and yet there's this steel, this as he says, carbon is to steel. There's a steelness to them. There's a strength within them that is persistence. Let's go over to page 184. He says there's symptoms of the lack of persistence. He says on line 205, he says, here you will find real enemies which stand between you and noteworthy achievement. Here you will find not only the symptoms indicating weakness and persistence, but also the deeply seated subconscious causes of this weakness. Study this list carefully. Face yourself squarely if you really wish to know who you are and what you're capable of doing. He's challenging you here. He's saying, look at these. Look at these symptoms. I'm going to highlight one, number 16. It's a fear of criticism. I mentor a lot of people. I've trained lots of people. I coach lots of people. This is probably the number one killer. Fear of criticism. Failure to create plans and put them into action because of what other people think, do, or say. What will they think of me? What if do you know how many people I know want to build a personal brand and can't make a 2-minute video to put on Facebook because they're so caught up in the fear of self-judgment, of what will people think? I don't want to make a fool of myself. It traps them. They've got great ideas and they're scared to make a video. They're scared to put it on social media because what will people think of me? This enemy belongs at the head of the list because it generally exists in one's subconscious mind where its presence is not recognized. He says, read the 6 basic fears in the last chapter. Let us examine some of the symptoms of fear of criticism. The majority of people permit their relatives, friends, and the public at large to so influence them that they cannot live their lives because of fear of criticism. Isn't that true? On line 263, he says, when Andrew Carnegie suggested that I devote 20 years to the organization of the philosophy of individual achievement, my first impulsive thought was fear of what people might say. The suggestion set up a goal for me far out of proportion to one I had ever conceived. Here he is, he's 26 years old, Napoleon Hill's 26 years old. He's sitting down with one of the most powerful, wealthiest men in the world. And at the end of this 3-day interview that he's doing for a magazine, Andrew Carnegie commissions Napoleon Hill to write this book, to study the lives of all these successful people, to go into a study and over 20 years and accumulate these principles that we find in this book that we study. And he says, as soon as Carnegie commissioned me, I rejected the idea. The suggestion set up a goal for me that was so out of proportion to anything he had ever seen himself. In other words, Carnegie saw in him something he didn't see. As quick as a flash of my mind began to create alibis and excuses, all the reasons why he couldn't do it. All of them back to the inherent fear of criticism. And something inside me said, you can't do this job. It's too big. It requires too much of your time. What will your relatives think? How will you earn a living? No one has ever organized a philosophy of success. What right do you have to believe that you can do it? Who are you anyway to aim so high? Remember your humble birth. What do you know about philosophy? People are going to think of you that you're crazy. And he said, and they did. Why hasn't some other person, if this is such a good idea, why didn't other people do it? He's got the wealthiest guy in the world. One of the most powerful people in the world saying, look, I'm going to open up my Rolodex to you, right? I'm going to introduce you to these people. I'm going to work with you. We all have our Moses moments. See, you think back to the Bible study of the story of Moses, and he's tending sheep and he sees the burning bush. He's a man of God. He believes in God. And he sees the bush and he knows the bush is burning and he knows that that's God. In his heart, he knows that. And God calls him by name. And he believes he's talking to God. And God calls him by name and says, I've chosen you to lead my people, to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And what's the first thing Moses does? No. You got the wrong guy. In the face of God, here's God himself saying, no, I've chosen you. No, you got the wrong guy. And what does he do? He says, well, maybe you're talking about my brother Aaron. God says, no, I picked you. Then what does Moses do? Well, you know what? I stutter. I'm not good with tongue. And what does God say? I made your tongue. Do you think I'm going to say, I'll give you the words to say? Well, they won't believe me. And so, he performs 2 miracles. Turns his staff to a snake, lepers his hand and heals him. Tells him that he'll turn water into blood. And even in the face of, even when we are in the face of God, we fail to recognize our giftedness from God. Even in the face of God, even when we know that God is calling us forward, even when we know that this is our purpose, that this dream is our calling. Even when we know that this idea didn't come to us, it's come through us. It's not from us, it's through us, from God. We have these moments, Moses moments. We fear what other people will think of us. These and many other questions flashed in his mind. See, life is a fight for territory. Life is a fight for territory. He says, these and many others flashed in my mind and demanded attention. It seemed as if the whole world had suddenly turned its attention to me with the purpose of ridiculing me and giving up on my desire to carry out Carnegie's suggestion. I had a fine opportunity then and there to kill off ambition before it gained control of me. Later in life, having analyzed thousands of people, I discovered that most ideas are stillborn and need the breath of life injected into them through definite plans of immediate action. The time to nurse an idea is at the time of its birth. Every minute it lives gives it a better chance of surviving. The fear of criticism is at the bottom of the destruction of most ideas which never reach the planning and action stage. This is why you need to be in a mastermind group. If you're working on a goal or a dream, you need to be around other people who are going to believe in you, who are going to fortify your belief, who are going to bear witness against this inner judge that's keeping a book of your shortcomings and your transgressions, who are going to fight for territory in your life. When you face the immunity to change, and we all do, even though we have this burning desire within us, there's also this inherent part of us that operates under the linguistic metaphor of better safe than sorry. And when we fight for our excuses, that's what we get. What you fight for, you get. What you fight for shows up. You want to fight for all the reasons why this won't work, all the reasons why you're not qualified, all the reasons why you can't do it. If you do that, Emerson said, where your focus goes, your energy flows. And your energy is what you create with. Let's bring this into a landing on page 188. He says, how to develop persistence. He says, there are 4 simple steps which lead to the habit of persistence. They call for no great amount of intelligence, no particular amount of education, but with little time or effort, you can do these. Hallelujah, winner, winner, chicken dinner. I mean, when I saw this, I thought, okay, there's hope for me. Because remember, when Patrick Hayes is handing me this book in 1991, I'm operating from this belief that I'm dumb and stupid. I'm operating from this belief that I'll never amount to anything. He says one definite purpose backed by burning desire. Costs you nothing to do. Number 2, definite plans expressed through continuous action. Costs you nothing to do. Number 3, a mind closed tightly against all negative and discouraging influences, including negative suggestions of relatives, friends, and acquaintances. Costs you nothing to do. A friendly alliance with one or more persons who will encourage you to follow through with both plan and purpose. Costs you nothing to do. You've got to apply these principles into your life. You got to apply these principles into your life. You've got to be willing to pay a price. Even though these things don't cost, you've got to pay. You've got to pay the price. The price of persistence, the price of struggle, the price of putting yourself out there and failing in front of other people and maybe, tripping and falling and having to pick yourself up and going again. The ability to apply these 13 principles within this book is directly correlated to your ability to develop persistence. And you have to do that. You have to develop persistence. You have to. This is why I encourage people to read this chapter every day for 14 days in a row. And if you miss a day, go back and start again. Getting this idea drilled into your mind. Listen to this video every day for 14 days. Listen to this lesson. And filter it through your life. And again, if you are not part of a mastermind group, if you don't have a group that's organized, that's structured, that has an agenda, that has training, that's going to support you, and you're looking for one, we've got one more starting in June. We got the one in May, and the early one in June is filled. We've got one more open in June. We won't do any more until the fall. If you want to get into one, go ahead and click in, let us know. I wish you all well. For those of you who are new to the Brain Revolution, hundreds of you have joined into the Brain Revolution to get certified through Joseph McClendon to be licensed by Dr. Daniel Amen. Congratulations on doing that. For those of you who this past month joined into the Fully Resource Program, great to have you part of the program as well. Be well, everybody. Bye-bye. God bless.